Hey there. Welcome to Spiritual Psychology. My name's Renee LaValle McKenna, and I bring my 30 plus years as a recovering addict and ex-crazy person turned therapist and shamanic healer to bring you snackable teachings on spirituality, psychology, and all things personal growth. And today I want to talk about following our dreams, or particularly why most people don't follow their dreams. And in this context, I'm not talking about the dreams that we have at night. I'm talking about those daydreams, the wishes, the wants, and desires of our soul. And one of my favorite quotes about dreams, in fact, it was probably one of the first inspirational quotes that stuck with me, is from a man named Richard Bach, who wrote a very simple classic, Jonathan Livingston Seagull. My dear departed mother gave me that book early in the 1980s. And intermittently over the years, I've reread it and written little inscriptions to myself in the cover. And I have my yellowing copy of it right here. It's a very simple book, almost like a children's book, but it is filled with profound wisdom. This quote actually came from a different book by Richard Bach, Illusions, The Adventures of a Reluctant Messiah. And Bach is still alive. He's 86 years old. I aspire to live to 86. In fact, I just turned 59. That gives me 27 more years. And inspired by this quote, I am pursuing my dreams diligently. And I keep a running and ever-growing list of dreams and inspirations that I hope to get to before I leave this planet. I'm in kind of an inner competition with myself, at least with my higher self when I'm in touch with her, to see how many limitations I can overcome and barriers I can break, how many fears I can dissolve and face, because I want to give myself a thumbs up at the end of my time here and feel like I sucked the juice out of this lemon as best I could. And so my favorite inspiring quote by Richard Bach is that we are never given a dream without also being given the power to make it come true. We may have to work for it, however. And I do believe that this is a great truth, that our daydreams of joy, fulfillment, connection, happiness are gifts from God, whispers from our deepest self, advertisements from the larger consciousness system of what's possible if we are willing to overcome our fears and limitations and work toward them. But we can't work towards something we don't believe is possible. And most of humanity is more concerned with security, which is rooted in fear, than it is in joy and fulfillment. And tragically, most people live a safe, secure, boring, and generally unfulfilling life, and then they die anyway. Because as I like to remind myself and others, no one gets out of here alive, and safety itself is an illusion. And maybe it seems like there's more value if you live a boring, unfulfilling life for 86 years rather than 56 years or 26 years. And although being bored, unfulfilled, and moderately unhappy is normal, or at least extremely common, it is actually a choice and it's unnecessary. But most of us are culturated to try to be normal, which generally means working a job we don't care about, being in a relationship that's uninteresting, and generally keeping ourselves comfortable with things that don't challenge us very much. And there's nothing wrong with that, except it seems like having an apple tree that doesn't really produce any apples. And so following our dreams is actually abnormal. To follow our joy and put our efforts into fulfilling our heart's desires is actually discouraged for most people. I've had the great privilege of working with a client from Tokyo recently, a young man who has the potential to actually be a gifted healer. He speaks 5 languages, loves to travel, and in our spiritual psychology work together, he's working deeply with the wisdom and energy of the elements: water, earth, rock, and fire. And spirit guide work is a really profound way to gather insight and information and have a conversation with higher consciousness in the larger system. And so in one of our sessions, we started to talk about how boring his job is and look into his deeper dreams and aspirations for himself. And I queried if he'd be interested in pursuing any of those. And he said, oh yeah, after I retire. So he's in his 20s. And I asked him why he would want to wait 30 years to do the things that make him happy. And he immediately said, oh, it's not possible to do those things now. I could never support myself. Impractical, improbable, pipe dreams for the future. And I repeated the Richard Bach quote to him, that I believe we are never given a dream without also being given the power to make it come true, and that we may have to work for it, and that this is a spiritual principle. And we did an inner journey about this block of disbelief. And inner journey work, if you haven't done it, is often quite visual and experiential. Our own psyche is just always ready to tell us our deeper truth if we're willing to pursue it. And so we journeyed to this place of the elementals and asked this question, what blocks me from my dreams? And he was presented with a wall, and on the wall was a darkened mirror of his own face. And his guides instructed him to dive through the mirror, and he was brave enough to do that. And he moved through a confusing vortex of energy and color and found himself in a vast, dark, warm, and seemingly empty place. But he felt very safe there and held. And he said it feels like a cosmic womb. And again, in inner journey work, we can travel to infinite places, spaces, experiences in the larger consciousness system. All of it's available to us, drug-free, if you care to go there. And this place that my client ended up in, again, is a known space. And his experience of a womb-like feeling has been my own experience as well. Taoism calls it the pregnant void. Some might call it the ground of being. Others refer to it as 0-point consciousness. And it is the place of endless possibility, a space of immeasurable creativity from which all things arise. And it is not that spirit is limited. It is the limits of our own beliefs of what's possible that place the limitations on the limitless. And so the wall that blocks my client and most of us from our dreams and deepest desires is the wall of our own self, our own limited self, and being attached to being normal, acceptable, staying comfortably in the familiar stories that we have about our own self. All of the narratives of things that have happened in the past that construct this ego idea of who we are and what's possible and not possible. And I've been dabbling in the circles of non-duality for the last few years with teachers like Eckhart Tolle, Adyashanti, Mooji. I did a podcast number 51, What the Fuck is Non-Duality, if you want to learn more about that. And one of the main concepts of non-duality is the transcendence or dissolution of the ego self, that there really is no self. It's all just a mental construct. And that there's tremendous freedom when we can release or supersede these inner narratives of who we think we are. And for most of us, that's some of the work that we need to do to fulfill these dreams that we are given. And I do believe that we are given them. In fact, I believe that fulfilling and pursuing them is our work here as humans. I think it's a soul-level responsibility to pursue our dreams and joy. And there's often a lot of work involved in that. Inner work, willingness to make other people uncomfortable, to face our fears, to find out what we're really capable of, which is always inspiring and encouraging and helpful on a deeper level for the larger system, because we're here to be ourselves. Most of us spend our time in some role that was given to us that has very little to do with our soul self. So the concept from non-duality that has come to me recently that I found really helpful is this question, who am I if I have no memories? Who am I if I have no past? And all the great teachings tell us that the present is the only thing that's real, this moment right now. That the future and the past are illusions, and most of us spend an inordinate amount of time in the past or the future and very little time actually right here, right now, which is the only place that our happiness and fulfillment can happen. And like my client, we put it off to some time in the future. And the great danger of that is that the future is uncertain. And forgive me if I've told this story before, but my ex-husband was a union electrician for over 30 years. And just before he retired, one of his friends retired, worked hard his whole life, and they bought that camper. And they were going to travel around the country. And they were getting their house rented, getting everything all set up. and he had a heart attack and died. The age I am right now. And they never got to use that camper. And all those years working, getting himself a good pension, may keep his wife secure, but he never got to live his dreams. And if you feel inspired to transcend your own limitations, my first suggestion is to write a list of everything you would do if you had no fear, infinite wealth, and all the time in the world. Put aside all those little voices that tell you it's silly, not possible, and open that door to the pregnant void and how it might want to express itself through you. But be careful who you share that list with, because most people will give you all the reasons that you can't or shouldn't or will never do those things. But writing things down is in itself a ritual of manifestation, taking something out of the metaphysical realm of our own imagination and into the physical world through words on paper. And dreams are like precious eggs. They're fragile. They need to be cared for, nurtured. They need a nest or circumstances where they can hatch. And then they need to be fed, taught to fly. And I'll end with my second favorite inspirational quote. When we've come to the edge of the light of all we know and are about to step into the darkness of the unknown, faith is knowing one of two things will happen: that we will be given something solid to stand on, or we will be given wings to fly. Thank you so much for listening. I'm preparing for the final celebratory retreat of my year-long mentorship program. So excited to see my mentees in person. We're meeting in Berkeley, California, later in the month. My next session of mentorship will begin in September. And the prerequisite for mentorship is to do a block of spiritual psychology sessions with me. So if you'd like to find out more, email me info@reneemckenna.com. We'll set up a free discovery call. If you'd like to do some of this powerful healing work in your own space, I have a new digital course, Transforming Trauma, where you can work through my book and audio series, Allies and Demons, Working with Spirit for Power and Healing, available on Amazon and Audible. There's a link in the show notes for all those transformational tools. Thank you so much for all those who support this podcast through Patreon and my website. Blessings on your path until we meet again. This is Renee LaValle McKenna for Spiritual Psychology.